Hello, this is the host. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of jonbenet Ramsey? This was the daughter of wealthy parents who lived in Boulder, Colorado. On December 26, 1996, the 6-year-old girl's battered body was found in the basement of her home after being missing for 6 days. She had been strangled with a piece of ligature. Her skull had been fractured multiple times. She had also suffered severe sexual abuse. The case remains unsolved. There is a theory that John Ramsey killed his daughter, and that his wife made some pretty suspicious statements in the weeks following the murder. Let's take a look at this case now. In 1996, John Ramsey worked for a computer software company called Access Graphics Systems, Incorporated. He was the executive vice president. In addition to his work, he was a member of several boards of directors for other companies. He was also involved in several business ventures. John was referred to as a self-made millionaire. John's wife was named Patsy. Like her husband, she was very well off financially. The couple had 2 children, 9-year-old John Ramsey Jr. and 6-year-old jonbenet Ramsey. The family lived at 755 Shadow Hills Drive in Boulder, Colorado. On December, just after 5:30 p.m., John came home from work. He let himself into the house with a key. When he got inside, he noticed that the front door was open and there were signs of a struggle. The intruder apparently entered through the back door, which was unlocked. When John got home, Patsy was not there. She was attending a social club meeting, but she should have been finished by this time. So John called out for his son and daughter. When he didn't hear a response, he started to get worried. He found the back door glass panel smashed, and that's when he noticed a note on the wall right next to the door. The note said, "I'm sorry, but I have to hide. He has a gun." This implied that an intruder had taken the children hostage. It also implied that the intruder had left John and that he was safe. This was actually a lie. Whoever wrote the note intended for John to read it right after he walked in the door. That way, if the intruder was still in the house, he would have less of an opportunity to attack John. John called the police and told them what he had seen. When officers arrived, they found the note. They also saw signs that someone had used the phone line to make a call. The officer turned on the television and radio to alert the public about the situation. As the minutes ticked by, John kept calling out for his kids. He never gave up hope that they were still alive. But when the police collected some fingerprints and dusted for some footprints, they realized that they weren't dealing with a kidnapping. The prints and footprints all belonged to John, Patsy, and the children. And by the time Patsy got home, everyone knew they were dealing with a murder. Here's what happened next. John told the police that he was going to go to Patsy's social club to see if she had any news on their kids. Patsy stopped him. She said something along the lines of, "We can't talk to each other right now." So John called his mother and asked her to come over and take care of things. Meanwhile, Patsy sat down at the kitchen table and waited for the authorities to do their job. To say that she was calm is a bit of an understatement. Here's what one of the investigators said about her. "I had never seen anybody go through such a horrific event and not show more emotion. The rest of us were crying and screaming and carrying on. She wasn't crying. She wasn't upset." After several hours, the police found little jonbenet's body in the basement. The autopsy showed that she died from strangulation. But she had also suffered other injuries prior to her death. An injury to her head could have been caused by a fall, but it was definitely inflicted by someone or something heavy. As far as the sexual assault, we don't know exactly what happened. The injury to her genital area could have been caused by insertion of a finger or an object. This much is certain, though, jonbenet was sexually assaulted. Following her daughter's murder, Patsy went to the media and pleaded for her killer to turn himself in. She did an interview with Larry King. During the interview, she talked about how strong she was for her son and how she wanted the killer caught. She said that she didn't want to let her emotions get the best of her because her son needed her to be strong. A few weeks later, Patsy went on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Once again, she insisted that she was trying to be strong. She said, "My strength is for my son. He needs me to be strong because he has questions, and I need to have answers." She must have seemed like a great mother, right? Well, the police thought there was something a bit off about her behavior. After the show, they brought her in for an interview. The detectives tried to explain the inconsistencies in her story to Patsy. For example, her statement about the intruder having a gun, the fact that the kids were missing for so long, and that John was supposedly safe. Patsy's response was that she hadn't slept in days and that she might have mixed up some details. She said that when she first heard about the gun, she automatically assumed that the intruder had one. She said that she didn't call the police sooner because she believed her daughter was still alive. When Patsy heard about the autopsy results and learned that JonBenet had been sexually assaulted, she broke down. But before she started crying, she asked permission to pray. The detective said she prayed for several minutes, and then she cried. Here's what that detective said about it. "I felt she was calculating how long it was going to take me to leave the room so she could compose herself and start crying." The police decided to let Patsy go. They didn't have enough evidence to hold her. Technically, she was a victim as well. The problem was that from the moment they found JonBenet's body, the police had a hard time believing anything Patsy said. After she left the police station, she continued to speak out in the media. She talked about how she missed her daughter's hugs and her infectious smile. She said, "It's the not knowing that drives me insane. Every minute of every day, I keep replaying that day in my mind, trying to figure out what happened." What the police were wondering was why she was so eager to get in the media spotlight. Why was she acting so strangely? Was she doing this to throw the police off their scent? A few months after the murder, John and Patsy went on a national tour, doing interviews to raise awareness about their daughter's murder. They also set up a foundation in JonBenet's name. All the while, the police were investigating them. Then, in September of 1997, they were indicted on suspicion of murder. They were charged with 9 counts each, including sexual assault and child abuse. Just like that, the grieving parents became the prime suspects. What led the police to believe that John and Patsy were guilty was the lack of evidence pointing elsewhere. Plus, they had established a history of questionable activity. Another thing that raised suspicion was the ransom note. The author was an unknown person. It was written on paper that was torn from an encyclopedia. The paper had special acid-free corners to prevent it from decaying. The ink on the paper was almost certainly manufactured between 1989 and 1994. The ink in the house was from the early 1990s. The paper on which the ransom note was written wasn't available until 3 years after JonBenet's murder. How does that make any sense? The only conclusion the investigators could draw was that the ransom note was written by someone other than the murderer. There were several trials over the years. The district attorney who originally handled the case was criticized for mishandling the evidence. Eventually, the Colorado Supreme Court threw out the indictment against the Ramseys. They said that the prosecution had withheld evidence that could have helped the defense. In 2008, the remaining charges were dropped. The statute of limitations had expired. Even though the case was officially closed, the district attorney said that he still suspected John and Patsy. But that's not the end of the story. Since then, several people have claimed to have information about the murder. One man, Gary Lever, even confessed to it. However, DNA evidence proved that he wasn't the killer. Another person of interest was John's business partner, Florence Dionelly. She was questioned multiple times, but she invoked her right to remain silent. She took her own life in 2006. To this day, no one knows whether or not she was involved in JonBenet's murder. Regarding John and Patsy, DNA testing was conducted on both of them. In 2016, a CBS News correspondent obtained the results of the DNA testing. According to the results, neither John nor Patsy matched the DNA profile developed from the evidence. We don't know where the DNA sample came from, though. Maybe it was from under JonBenet's fingernails. If so, that would prove that she struggled with her killer. But without knowing what the DNA sample was from, these results aren't really meaningful. Another forensic analyst named Joe Scott Morgan believes that the case was mishandled from the beginning. He says that the main reason the case was bungled was because the resources and attention were focused on John and Patsy. All the other leads went nowhere. And that's the case of JonBenet Ramsey. Do you think John and Patsy killed their daughter? Or do you think that they were innocent, misguided parents who did their best to cope with the tragedy? Let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your support. Thank you for watching.